The HOA president called the cops on me for illegally camping at my own lake. What she didn't know was that her entire neighborhood had been trespassing on my property for 15 years. It was 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I was standing there in my boxer shorts, holding my property deed, while two deputies walked up to my grandfather's old canvas tent. The smell of campfire coffee hung in the lake mist, gravel crunched under their boots, and behind them came Patricia Whitmore's shrill voice. "That's him, officers. Illegal camping. Disturbing our peaceful community." She was tapping her red nails against her iPad like she was personally delivering justice. The deputies were apologetic, but said they had to respond to the complaint. So there I was, packing up the tent, while HOA residents watched from their decks like it was Saturday morning entertainment. The humiliation burned worse than the bacon grease I'd spilled on my hand earlier that week. But here's what Patty didn't know. I'd just spent 3 days in the county courthouse basement. What I found in those old records was about to turn her perfect lakeside community upside down. My name is Mike. I inherited 47 acres of pristine lake property from my grandfather, a World War II veteran who bought the land in 1952 with his GI Bill money. Crystal clear spring-fed water, over a mile of shoreline, some of the best bass fishing in the county. Growing up, our family had a sacred tradition. Every summer we'd camp there for a week. Grandpa taught me to fish from his hand-built stone dock, showed me the old 1920 survey markers carved into certain trees, and told stories around the ancient fire pit he'd built rock by rock. After my divorce last year and losing my corporate job 3 months later, those camping trips became my lifeline. The smell of wood smoke, loons calling across the water at dawn, morning dew on bare feet. This place kept me sane when everything else fell apart. The property sits right next to Lakeside Estates, a fancy HOA development built in 2008. $1 million homes, manicured lawns, people who measure grass height with rulers. I'd always gotten along fine with the neighbors. We'd wave, chat about the weather. Then Patricia Whitmore got elected HOA president. She's 52, drives a white BMW X5, works in real estate. Her claim to fame is citing people for unapproved Christmas lights and photographing violations with her iPad while wearing designer yoga pants. She once issued a written warning because someone's mailbox was 3 degrees off vertical. Trouble started when she began walking the property line with a measuring tape. Friday evening, I arrived for my usual 3-day camping trip. I set up Grandpa's wall tent in the exact same spot we'd used for decades, 50 yards from the water, right next to his stone fire pit. I'd done it hundreds of times. Never a complaint. Saturday at 6 a.m. Sharp, here comes Patty with 2 sheriff's deputies. "This is a residential area with camping restrictions," she announced like she was reading from an official proclamation. "You need to remove this immediately." I showed them the deed. Clear as day. Michael Stevens, inheritor of the estate of Robert Stevens, 47 acres, including all water rights and easements. The deputies looked uncomfortable. One of them actually apologized. "Sir, we have to respond to complaints, but this looks like a civil matter." Patty wasn't backing down. "He's disturbing the peace and affecting our property values. This isn't a campground." So I packed up while a dozen residents stood on their decks with coffee, watching the show. As I loaded my truck, Patty delivered her parting shot. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before causing problems for our community." That's when I decided to find out exactly what our community meant. Monday morning, I was still fuming in my woodworking shop when a certified letter arrived from County Code Enforcement. Patty had filed an official complaint claiming I was operating an unpermitted campground and disturbing residential peace. They threatened $500 daily fines until violations were corrected. $500 a day for camping on my own land. That afternoon, I drove to the courthouse. The basement records room smelled like floor wax and old paper. The county clerk, an elderly woman named Dolores, lit up when I mentioned my grandfather. "Oh, honey, Robert Stevens, your grandpa helped survey half this county. Meticulous as a Swiss watch." She pulled out the original 1919 property survey. Brittle yellow paper crackled as we unfolded it. We overlaid it with current maps. My hand started shaking. The HOA's private beach, their fancy gazebo, their boat launch, all of it sat on my land. 2.3 acres of prime waterfront that legally belonged to me. When they subdivided for the development in 2007, somebody made a huge mistake. Or maybe they just hoped nobody would notice. Dolores pointed out something crucial: adverse possession laws. If someone uses your land openly for long enough, usually 7 to 20 years depending on the state, they might gain ownership. But because my family had been camping there regularly for decades, with photos and receipts to prove it, their claim would be almost impossible. Plus, Grandpa had filed a new survey in 1987 that specifically noted the eastern boundary markers. That reset any adverse possession clock. I walked out feeling like I'd found buried treasure. 2 days later, another certified letter arrived, this time from Whitmore and Associates Legal Services. Patty had hired an attorney to send a cease and desist, demanding I stop harassing residents with frivolous property claims and threatening to sue me for interfering with their quiet enjoyment of property. That Thursday, she called an emergency HOA meeting dealing with problem neighbors. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway. The clubhouse was packed. Patty stood at the front with a PowerPoint called Protecting Our Investment, complete with photos of my tent labeled Inappropriate Camping Activities. This individual, she said, clicking through slides, is attempting to exploit a technicality to steal our community amenities that we've invested hundreds of thousands to maintain. He wants to charge us rent for our own beach. I propose a special assessment of $8,000 per household to fund legal defense. That's when I stood up. Excuse me, I'm not trying to grab anyone's property. You're sitting on mine. I dropped a thick packet of courthouse documents on the table. Original 1919 survey overlaid with their development map. Beach, gazebo, boat launch, all on my land. 47 faces went from annoyed to concerned as papers passed hand to hand. Then Harold Jenkins, a retired surveyor who lives in the HOA, stood up from the third row. He studied the documents for a long time. These appear legitimate, he finally said. If accurate, this is a significant boundary discrepancy that should have been caught during the original development survey. The room went quiet. Patty's face turned pale. Harold offered to verify the boundaries with modern GPS equipment at no charge. This affects all of us. We deserve the truth. Patty sputtered that it was fabricated nonsense, but the meeting dissolved into chaos. 3 residents approached me afterward. One whispered she had her own boundary issues with Patty. Another said they never got proper surveys when buying. An elderly man shook my hand and said my grandfather was a good man from the VFW. If he said those markers were accurate, they were. The community was splitting. Team Patty versus Team Truth. For the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. Patty's response was swift. Within a week, she convinced the city council to investigate me for zoning violations, reported me to the IRS for unreported rental income from camping, and organized a whisper campaign that 3 of my woodworking clients canceled orders. Word spread I was unstable after my divorce and harassing innocent homeowners. Then a city inspector showed up during my next camping trip claiming I was running a commercial campground without permits. Another $500 daily fine threat. I could smell Patty's influence all over it. A few days later, Harold arrived with professional GPS gear and 2 HOA residents who'd grown tired of her leadership. We spent 4 hours locating every original marker. The results were worse than I thought. Not just the beach and gazebo, but 7 acres of what they called prime common area belonged to me. Even better, buried in the 1919 deed was a perpetual easement for lake access. My family had permanent legal right to cross any property needed to reach our lake, even if it was later developed. Harold's report was rock solid. The GPS matched the century-old markers within 18 inches. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. Drop this or you'll regret it. Linda, one of my new allies, called with inside info. Patty had admitted to the board she'd known about the boundary issues since 2019, but decided it was cheaper to fight than relocate amenities. She'd secretly recorded board meetings. The minutes showed they voted to suppress survey results and manage the situation quietly. Then came the bigger revelation. The HOA had borrowed $340,000 against the disputed waterfront property to renovate the clubhouse, using land they didn't own as collateral. Patty's brother-in-law had been the original developer. The family knew about the discrepancy from day one, but hid it to keep the profitable waterfront lots. An audit of HOA finances showed Patty had embezzled at least $73,000 over 4 years through fake invoices, inflated bills, and personal expenses charged to the community. The liability insurance excluded coverage for known disputes. If I won, homeowners could face $15,000 to $25,000 assessments each. This wasn't just about camping anymore. It was fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. I wasn't the troublemaker. I was the one who could expose what had been happening for years. We built a war room in my kitchen with survey maps, recordings, financial records, and a legal aid attorney named Sarah Chun who offered pro bono help. She organized the evidence and drafted options, demand removal of structures, or negotiate a long-term lease with back rent, estimated at $360,000 plus interest for 15 years of unauthorized use. We settled on a generous offer, $150,000 for a permanent easement so their amenities could stay, plus Patty's resignation and full disclosure of the fraud. Patty rejected it and escalated. Anonymous threats in my mailbox, slashed tires, city inspectors with ridiculous violation notices, fake one-star reviews on my business, social media smear campaigns calling me a con artist. Security cameras caught her at 2 a.m. spray painting fraud on my workshop fence. That footage went viral locally. The pressure mounted. Board members resigned. A private investigator she hired with HOA money quit after 2 weeks, concluding I was boringly law-abiding and the rightful owner. The district attorney filed criminal charges against Patty for embezzlement, conspiracy, and fraudulent misrepresentation. At the city council meeting, the room was packed. Patty gave an emotional speech with slideshows of kids on the beach, tears streaming, painting me as a heartless predator exploiting a paperwork error. I presented the surveys, GPS data, recordings. Sarah displayed bank records showing the embezzlement. Linda read the board minutes where Patty admitted knowing since 2019 and voting to cover it up. Then the DEA's investigator stood up. Patricia Whitmore, you're under arrest. Handcuffs clicked in front of the entire community. Cameras caught every second. The remaining board accepted my original settlement offer and apologized. The crowd applauded for 5 minutes straight. 6 months later, I'm sitting around Grandpa's stone fire pit. But I'm not alone. Harold teaches his grandson to tie fishing knots. Linda flips burgers on the new community grill. Kids laugh across the lake. Patty pleaded guilty, got 18 months probation and full restitution. The new board under Linda added transparency and term limits. Property values recovered and rose with the reputation for honest governance. The $150,000 let me expand my woodworking business and start a scholarship in Grandpa's name for veterans' kids learning trades. We put 20 acres under permanent conservation easement. School groups visit to learn wetland ecology. Nature trails are wheelchair accessible. The lake became more than family land. It became community land. Annual Lake Day festivals draw families from 3 counties. Veterans share stories around the campfire. Neighbors actually talk to each other now. Sometimes I sit on the dock at sunset watching families enjoy amenities that almost got torn down by one person's greed. The water reflects not just trees and sky, but the faces of people who chose truth over convenience, cooperation over conflict, justice over expediency. Grandpa always said the lake belonged to anyone willing to respect it. Turns out he was right.